Hello and welcome to this month's Bytesize. My name is Ben and great to have you with us. Today we're digging into a challenge that is often overlooked in the world of digital subscriptions. How do you give customers real flexibility, especially those on prepaid plans, without compromising the experience? Yes, we're talking about smart top-ups. Think temporary access to streaming services, those bite sized bundles, and new ways to reach users who don't want but also can't commit to traditional subscriptions. This affects telcos, content providers like streamers and gamers, plus a whole raft of other resellers like banks and retailers, and definitely consumers like you and me too. So we've got 15 to 20 minutes of insight packed content. Plus, you get the opportunity to ask questions as well. So you can ask them in the chat. Just go onto the LinkedIn event and add a comment, and we'll address those at the end of the session. So I think we get this show on the road. Joining me once again is Jo Parsons, who is the Group Product Manager here at Bango. She's back from, actually, she was joining us in April to talk about subscription engineering at scale. So welcome back, Jo. It's great to have you here.
Hi, Ben. Yeah, it's great to be back. Thank you. And again, apologies in advance if the dogs decide to make either a visual or vocal contribution to the session. They were perfectly behaved last time, so we hope.
We'll keep our fingers crossed. So, Jo, smart top-ups are offering a fresh way for people to access content without the usual subscription strings attached, right? So before we get into the detail, can you just set the scene for us a little bit more? And what is driving this shift?
Okay, so let's look at some background context and let's use the telco prepaid market as an example. So what percentage, Ben, of the world's mobile phones are prepaid, roughly, would you say?
I can't believe you're asking me a question, right? Okay. I don't know. I'd say probably 50-50, right? 50-50 split.
Okay, well, you're nearly right. It's actually close to 70%. That's, actually over 6 billion prepaid mobile accounts globally. And it's actually even more dominant in regions like Latin America, Africa, and APAC, as you can see here. And the prepaid market is a really tough one. It's very saturated. You can't just sort of compete on price to gain market share, and you can't rely on things like a smooth top-up credit process to avoid people looking elsewhere. Everything's much the same. And it's quite a volatile market as a result. There's lots of churn with customers looking for the best deal.
Right. So if price alone won't win over those kind of prepaid users, what else could these telcos do to drive loyalty here?
Okay, so let's look at some common incentives. So starting with postpaid, customers tend to stick around longer, especially if they're paying off a device. But in the prepaid, there's no contract, so you've got to look at other incentives to keep them engaged. So things like bonus extra offers are great for this. Spend $10 and we'll give you an extra $2 credit or extra data or extra minutes. And a reward portal where you can see discount offers or points which can be accumulated over time to redeem good awards is, it's another good option. But what we're really starting to see as well is a shift towards offering limited time access to popular streaming services in the prepaid space.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so are we talking about gift cards and vouchers here, or is it something a little bit more evolved from that?
It's certainly similar and we can learn from it. So let's take a moment to think about subscription services from the point of view of the customer. And, let's face it, subscriptions aren't for everyone. With rising living costs, not everyone wants or can afford a monthly fee. Maybe you just want to binge a series over a weekend. And in that case, something like a one-off payment or a gift card is way more flexible. Take Netflix. You can use a gift card to access the service once it runs out. And if you've got no other payment method linked to your account, your access simply pauses until you top up again by redeeming another gift card.
So just to clarify on that one then, so if your Netflix top up runs out, does the subscription just get cancelled, or do you have to like restart with registration all over again?
No, it just pauses your account until you top up again to gain access. So you don't need to create a new account. And it's actually the same story with things like Hulu or Disney and subscriptions for gaming, music, fitness, and loads more. And it's a really sort of smart B2C tactic for reaching users who don't want or can't commit to subscriptions. But of course, here at Bango, we're all about B2B2C. So we enable resellers to bundle and resell content in ways that work for all of their customers, including prepay.
So how about bringing those two worlds together, right? How do we bring those two approaches together? How can we get resellers then to create these kind of standout offers for users who prefer that kind of pay-as-you-go approach?
Okay, so here are some examples. You can choose to offer limited time free access based on certain criteria. So you could have a roll to bill option where the service automatically renews if you've got credit to continue that service when the renewal is due. You could earn access to a subscription for a limited time as a reward for topping up by a given amount. Or you could look at it as an a la carte. So, you could purchase 3 days of subscription using credit from your account. And so really, we're talking about sort of popular streaming services offered in sort of bite-sized amounts, which are a great sort of bundling opportunity in what is basically a massive market.
It all sounds very simple in theory, right? But I'm guessing there's quite a few complications under the hood when we talk about this sort of stuff.
Yeah, for sure. So certainly in the resale space. So we've got sort of 3 major issues. So we've got considerations around broken access, complex top-up behavior, and sort of poor visibility. And this is where sort of smart top-ups comes in. So if you think about the sort of traditional subscription model, this gives a customer an ongoing, automatically renewing access to the service until they cancel it. And the top-up model is different because each top-up is finite and the customer only gets access for a limited amount of time. And that duration is extended if the customer tops up again before their access expires. And most content providers simply provide an active service until they're told to terminate it. So handling that sort of top-up stacking and recalculating when access to the service should end really falls to the reseller. And obviously it's important for the customer because they expect if they purchase multiple top-ups, they're expecting their access to the service to continue uninterrupted. So say, for example, you buy 5 days of access, the next day you buy another 5, you're going to expect 10 days of access total, not 6 because they overlapped, and definitely no blackout period between the two.
And I just want to say as well, this is obviously a live stream session. If there's any questions that you have at all, please pop them into the chat and we can address them towards the end as well. But yeah, that sounds like an absolute nightmare, right, for the customer. So, and if it's not settled from the start, we're into a really, really sticky situation, right?
For sure. And of course, top-ups aren't always the same either. They can vary in length or even access level. So you've got to have some logic to stack and schedule them properly.
So it's really kind of like about ensuring that consumer is getting what they're paying for, right, in this situation.
Exactly that. And content providers want to know what's happening too. I'll come on to this a bit more in a minute, but you need to let them know when an activity they are interested in has actually happened. Maybe they want to know when the top-up was created. Maybe they want to know when it's been activated. Maybe both. The point is it can't be a black box for them. And obviously with all of this stuff, you can't sort of forget about your NFRs. What happens if your notifications aren't delivered or are delivered out of order? And it's not just about ensuring sort of access continuity. You've also got to think about, what happens in the real world, because at some point that credit is going to run out, isn't it, Ben?
Yeah, I suppose sometimes you may certain months or certain points in your what you're doing, your activity, you might prioritize data and 4G connection, right? Just so you can be on the internet, or maybe you want to listen to more music one month if you're traveling or something like that, or maybe you want to watch, like you said, binge watch a favorite series. I can imagine it's never a straight linear way of access and way of approach here.
Yeah, exactly. So we need to think about how the life cycle is managed, and there are a few ways we can do this. So the ideal setup, you just pause the access when the credit runs out and resume it again when the customer tops up again. No reactivation needed.
That sounds great, to be fair. So you mentioned some other options as well, Jo.
Yeah. So not all content providers can actually support that flow easily in the resale channel. And so for content providers who don't support that sort of suspend and resume flow, the subscription does need to be terminated, and you need to create a new one with potentially a new activation associated to it, which is obviously a less good experience. And in addition, not all content providers offer that same sort of terminate functionality. Usually they don't give you the option to specify a future date which you can repeatedly change to terminate. So you need to manage that yourself on the reseller side, and then basically just tell the content provider in real time when that termination needs to happen. And again, you still have to cater for all those unhappy parts. What happens if your request to terminate was rejected or couldn't be completed, the usual. So all of this complexity is really now sitting with the reseller, needing to manage a collection of different scenarios to give their customers the best possible experience while working with the variations in top-ups and termination options supported by the different content providers.
Yeah, and I imagine once you're working with multiple content providers as well, the operational headaches must completely ramp up in this situation as well. So, yeah, it's quite a heavy lift, right? So, you've kind of focused, Jo, mainly on the kind of reseller aspect at the moment. So, what about the content provider? You said you're going to touch upon this. So, what about the key challenges for that particular side?
Okay, so yeah, I said I'd come back to them. Okay, so from the content provider side, it's really all about understanding what and when, and in many ways it's a shared challenge, because when it comes to reporting and reconciliation and billing, you want to make sure you're sort of comparing apples with apples. So what did the user purchase? Say a subscription runs for 15 days. Was that 3 5 days top up or one 15-day top up? And each has a different price point. So you need this to be able to get clarity on your bills. And similarly, when was it purchased? The when is really important. Different content providers have different billing requirements. Some will bill on top-up creation, others on activation. So not knowing when something was purchased, again, can lead to those billing discrepancies, and you don't really want to spend ages reconciling data all the time. And finally, if you don't know what was bought or when it was bought, you don't know when it's going to end. So you can't forecast revenue or reach out with the right messaging at the right time. So really, you're sort of flying blind.
So does seem quite problematic, right, for all parties involved if they're trying to distribute subscription content and so on. And it's that visibility and consistency on those behaviours that are needed, right, to be tracked. So I guess if we want to dig into this into a little bit more detail and kind of what the solution is. So we've got smart top-ups, it's the name of the session. So let's talk a little bit more around this feature that's part of the digital vending machine.
Sure. So basically how it works is we take on the stacking, the scheduling, the notifications and the reporting, really to basically simplify the end-to-end for our partners. So from the content provider's perspective, tell us what top-up durations are available, tell us what notifications you want, and tell us what happens when the top-ups run out. Do we suspend or do we terminate? And it's also really simple from the perspective of the reseller. Create an entitlement, tell us when it tops up. And then by creating this sort of configurable standard between the two partners, we enable resellers to really hit the ground running, able to offer top-ups from a variety of content providers really quickly and easily.
So just hold on a second. So you're saying just 2 data points, right, from the reseller, and then 3 from the content provider, and then you're all set up. That's it.
Yeah, it's really that simple, and it really works for everyone. Customers get flexible access, resellers avoid heavy integrations, content providers get the insights, and it doesn't stop at streaming. You can apply this to loyalty schemes, short-term promos, vouchers, and a lot more.
Thanks, Jo, for that. I think we talk a lot about this kind of subscription access for kind of limited amount of time period in your examples, but obviously this application is a little bit wider as well, right? So do you want to talk us a little bit more about some of the examples here shown on screen?
Sure. So it's flexible. Subscription add-ons like movie rentals could use this process, a seasonal sports pass, gift cards or vouchers to provide a month of subscription access, or redeeming loyalty points for a certain level of access to a streaming service. All of these can be used as sort of loyalty levers, if you like, for your customers within the DVM.
I suppose really opening up quite a lot of other options, really, so from out the conventional monthly billing cycle of a subscription, right? So it's definitely it's a really interesting way of approaching this. But this also isn't just a telco story either, right? I know you talked a lot about the prepaid market and the kind of lessons that we can learn from that, but it goes beyond that. So there's all sorts of different top-up opportunities for resellers that are offering kind of limited perks and benefits to their customers. Do you want to talk a little about these 2 examples you've got kind of on screen here too?
For sure. As you say, it's not just for telcos. That was an example. So basically, this is really about anywhere access needs to be bought, managed, or extended. Smart top-ups can play a role. So whether it's retail, banking, any kind of loyalty scheme, there's huge potential here. And obviously, we're sort of aiming to try and be that simplification in the middle for all of the partners involved.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Jo, for kind of talking through, smart top-ups, how it kind of works. We promised you 15 minutes of content, and it was 15 minutes of content. We've now got some time to spare to kind of talk through some sort of questions. So please put them through into the chat, and we'll try and address them one by one. There's actually one question that's come through from Hirendra. Thank you very much for your question here. What revenue assurances measures are there in this?
So
it's an interesting one.
It is a very interesting one. So I think this really falls down to the business model between the reseller and the content provider. So it's something we don't sort of directly do ourselves, because it is, as I said, it's the reseller and the content provider working together to determine what they're offering to the market. Our job is really very much focused on supporting, making sure that we've got the right reporting information, the right reconciliation, and the right information so that everything is accurate from the end-to-end market. And then, if you chose to do a sort of a prepaid top-up flow, which then does that roll to bill, obviously the longer-term revenue is sort of greater. But having that sort of revenue forecasting, even for sort of smaller top-ups, sort of gives you information. Does that help?
Yeah, I think it's kind of more like we're more of an enabler, right? We sit in between the two parties, but anything on commercials is between those two in that particular circumstance. So hopefully that addresses your question, Hendra. Thank you for your question. I've got another one here as well. So, do you have any examples of content providers that we've helped with these particular problems in this space? And can you share a little bit more information on there? Obviously, we can't share names, but could you just give an example on that one for us, Jo?
Yeah, for sure. So we were approached by a content provider who had this sort of black box problem, and what they wanted to be able to do was offer a variety of different top-ups for a single channel, and get that visibility on when something was purchased, when something was activated, and really get that sort of end-to-end view so that they could do that accurate billing and charging. Because if you've only got this subscription was active for this length of time, if you could sort of divide it into chunks of 5 days if you're only offering a 5-day top-up. But the moment you start offering different levels of top-up, that becomes a real challenge. So that was one of the things that we worked through with them to make sure, again, comes back to that billing and reporting, and the importance of that. So that was a really good use case for us to help. And that reporting is really important both for the resellers and the content providers.
Yeah, it's just all about visibility, right? Making sure everyone knows what's going on and keeping it open and transparent, right? Another question. So we talked a little bit about the content provider side, right? So on the telco side or on a reseller side, on the reporting side of things, you touched on it then before with the example they did there with the content provider. Could you talk a little bit more around on the kind of problems on for the reseller side? That'd be really interesting to know.
Yeah, sure. So again, it's the when. It's the what was purchased, when it was purchased, and then from the reseller side, if you've got content providers who want to bill you when a top-up is created and other content providers who want to bill you when a top-up is activated, you want your reporting to reflect that so that you can recognize that your invoicing is going to be accurate for each of the routes that you've got. So this is where, again, we're coming in with the reporting that enables that. So when we understand how these revenue models are working, we can then provide the reporting to support that. So again, we have that configuration to support both, which means it's easy for the reseller to just get reports to do the reconciliation.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that one. Another question's come through in the chat. Sabitha, thank you very much for your question. Do we see subscription price discount in the prepaid model apart from rewards and bonus?
We certainly could. We haven't yet, but yes, I mean, discount prices in prepaid models would certainly be an option that we could look at. So again, in the same way that if you buy credit and then you get extra credit, it's kind of a similar way of doing that discount model. So it potentially. Yeah,
I suppose it's opening up the flexibility, right, for these two parties to work with each other. So it's however they want to be able to approach that partnership, and what the best way of doing the commercials and everything around there is depending on those two different parties. We sit and can be the enabler of doing everything that they would like to do, and we also can help with kind of best practice and that sort of stuff as well from a kind of advisory point of view of other examples in market. So hopefully that addresses your question, Sabitha. Thank you for the question and joining for us in this bite size. If there's any other questions that can come through in the next minute or so, we'll address them. But if not, we can end the session there. Jo, so are you happy with what you covered? You think you're happy with the session and the content we've covered today?
Yeah, I think so. And thank you for your input as well, Ben.
No worries. One final question from Hirendra. He's come back again. He said, does this have a reward points module? Is there a rewards points module?
So no, the smart top-ups isn't a sort of a points module, if you like. It's very much more of a top-up module. But if you had a points module of your own that you could then use to redeem limited time access to a content provider's product or service, that would then be something we could link into, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, so I was thinking like a good example could be something like Avios, for example. That they have a points based system. Then you can redeem those on certain transactions or money off, whatever. There is a potential that that could still work for a subscription. Access to a subscription, for example. And
Exactly.
that's what we're kind of yeah. A question from Graham Wafer. So he says the one-time purchase model, would this cover both PPV events and digital content?
Yeah, so again, it's limited time access. So pay-per-view, if you're paying for a fight or for say for example you bought a movie or rented a movie, yeah, it's limited time access, so it would work for that as well.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point, a good question to ask. Okay, Jo, I think we'll call it there. Thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it, and hopefully we'll see you again at some point for another session. But really thank you for your time, and thank you for everyone on the line for watching as well. We really appreciate your effort to join these. Again, this session will be available on demand on our YouTube channel. Just make sure you're signing up to our Bango LinkedIn page so you can see updates from us. And we've got a lot of exciting stuff to come up as well for the rest of the year. So keep in touch. And if you need to get in touch with us, you can reach us at bango.com. Thanks a lot and speak to you all soon.
Thanks, Ben.
Bye-bye.